These are all of the books that I think you should read as adults, even though they're meant for children. Here they are in all their beautiful glory. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Carolyn and I'm so glad that you are here today. Today I'm going to be talking about the importance of children's literature and why we should read it still as adults. Why it's more important to even read it as an adult than it is to read it as a child. Not my last video, but the video before that, I told you guys that I am in the process of writing and illustrating my own children's story. And it's not a picture book, it's more of a novel with illustration throughout it. And it has been consuming my every waking second, and I have been loving it. My brain just can't turn off. All I'm thinking about is my story. And so when I was thinking about what video I wanted to film, I wanted to talk about children's literature, and while I was writing, I was thinking about all the aspects of why I still love to read children's literature as an adult, and why I think it's so important, and how it shapes our lives, and how it just has such a huge effect on us that no other reading has. And that is inspired by a quote from one of my favorite movies, and that is You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. It's a Nora Ephron movie. I love it so much. I think it came out in 1998, which is the year I was born. Part of me was born with that film because it's one of my favorites, and it has so much of my personality in it. Anyway, there is a quote in the movie, and it is from the main character, who is the owner of a children's bookshop in New York City, and it was first owned by her mother, and then her mother unfortunately passed away, and she now owns this children's bookstore. And the quote that she says in the movie that has always stuck with me is, "When you read a book as a child, it becomes part of your identity in a way no other reading in your life does." And I could not agree anymore. So many adults don't realize as they grow older that you should always return to the books that you loved as a kid. I know that whenever I return to books that I read as a child, it feels like turning back the clock and remembering how I felt when I was a child, which I think it's so important to always keep the child in you. I am very much an old soul, and I do feel much older than my years, but I always think it is so important to keep the child in you. So I wrote down a few things that I just want to talk about as topics of why children's literature is so important and why we should read it as adults. So the number one thing that I have to say about children's literature is it shapes the way that we think and we feel and we live, essentially, because we are introduced to so many new aspects of life as a child that you haven't experienced before, like birth and friendship and kindness and greed and growing up and growing old and especially death. And these are all aspects of life that are really hard to understand as a child, but then when you return to these aspects of life that you understand as an adult, they have such a greater effect on you than they did as a child. They introduce us, so they are the stepping stones to understanding life. But then once you do eventually understand that life as an adult and you return to those moments where it's being introduced to you for the first time, I think the effect is even more great. I know the book that I always think about in terms of these aspects is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, which really introduced me to the theme of greed and giving all of yourself to someone, and showing thanks for what you are giving, and appreciation and love. So much is in that book, and it's so short and simple, but it packs everything in it. It packs so much of life in it, and it was one of those books that I always have such a great attachment towards. And another one is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. That is the book that introduced me to so much. It introduced me to friendship and adventure, and also greed in a way, and the aspects of what is essential, and everything that is essential is invisible to the eye. What is essential is love and emotion and connection and your attachment to other beings and and appreciating your life when you have it, and living for the moment, and living for yourself, and loving the people that are around you. And it's one of those books that I read it every year, and I love it so much, and I get more and more attached to it the more that I read it, and love the illustrations as well. All of these books are mostly fully illustrated, and that is another aspect of why children's literature means so much to me, is because as an illustrator, the magic of children's literature, and I wish that, and some books for adults do have illustrations throughout them, but I kind of wish that every single book ever written had an illustrator attached to it, not only a novelist or an author. The combination between a written story and a visual narrative makes and forms imaginations. And when you read about a scene without an illustration, you can come up with an image for yourself. So I do think that there is so much power in that, and there is so much importance in that. But when you are given a picture, it gives you a look into the possibility, or one of the possibilities, of the written description, or it just gives life to words. When I was a kid, I had a really hard time reading. I wasn't reading up to my grade level, which is so funny because now I'm like a huge reader and a writer and a storyteller and an illustrator. So I think that all these things kind of affected who I was. But when I was younger, I always loved books with pictures because it was like islands in a sea of words. It took me from place to place, and it gave me an anchor point to hang on to, and it helped me to visualize, because something that I had trouble with as a kid was visualizing what I was reading, and that has really influenced why I want to be a children's book writer and illustrator, and why it's so important to me is because writing, storytelling, and also storytelling through visual images is so influential to how you perceive everything. As children, we don't look to art museums, we don't look to art history, we don't look for visual artists in general, because we don't know to look for them, but we find them in the books that we read, and we find them in the process of learning how to read, because we have illustrated books for children to understand what art is, and what drawing is, and what visual expressions and pictures are, and it's such a magical thing, and illustration as a whole. And so if I didn't have those books, I wouldn't be here right now talking to you about my process of illustrating my own book and just the books that have influenced me, and I just wouldn't be here at all. And it's just magic. It's just complete and utter magic, and that's why I think that we can't forget that. And growing older as an adult, we are so consumed in books for adults because that's how they are advertised to us, or that's how they are expressed to us, that we have to read books that are meant for adults. And we can only read children's books if we have children, if we're reading to a child, or if you are reading a children's book, it almost feels a little silly. And I always feel that way too sometimes, but then I have to remind myself that it's not silly. It's all part of appreciating literature, and it's all part of your growth, and it's almost more beneficial than certain adult books. Depending on the adult book that you read, sometimes certain children's books are more beneficial to read for your own mind, in all senses, in the messages that they are portraying, and in everything that they have to say, and that the way that they will affect you. Another thing that I think to always understand and to always remember is that adults are the ones writing these children's books, and that just because they are geared towards this audience of children doesn't mean that adults can't enjoy them. I think they should be advertised to adults just as well as to children. As I'm writing my story, I'm thinking about if an adult is reading this book to a child, the adult will appreciate certain elements of the story even more than the child, even though it is a children's story. Another thing to remember is that they shape our personalities from a very young age. The books that we read ultimately shape how we behave, how we act. As an adult, my personality is definitely influenced by the books that I read. I am mainly a classics reader, and like I said, I am a very old soul. My personality is pretty much being a reader, a writer, and an illustrator, and that is pretty much my personality in 3 words. The book that I'm writing is influenced by classics, is kind of written in the format of the essence of a classic. I don't want to give too much away. It's part of my personality. It's how I think, it's how I act, it's me. Classics is me. And so are children's books and children's classics, and children's literature as a whole affects our personalities in such a beautiful way. Can you imagine that these people, these authors that we've possibly never met before, that don't know that we exist, wrote these stories because they had them in their minds and they had them in their hearts, and they knew that there were people out there or children out there that would care about the stories that they have to tell. And ultimately, when they tell those stories and affect the reader so much that they influence the person that they are. Are you kidding? Like, it's just so beautiful. And that's why we need to read children's literature as adults. It's so important. My main point that I want to get across to you is that they make us the readers that we will become as adults. Children's literature has such an influential part in our lives, in our growth, in our childhoods, and that is always something that we should return to as adults, to relive our childhoods, to appreciate what we had when we were so young, and to reevaluate the things that we were given and that we see. And I feel like our perceptions change when we read children's literature because of all the things that I've said. They introduce us to new aspects of life, and they give us so much. And after reading so many classics, so many adult books, so many books that don't have pictures, it is so beautiful finding a story that is illustrated, to see how this artist and illustrator took these words and reimagined them and brought them to life on paper, as well as the author bringing the story to life through words. And it's just brilliant. It is just beautiful. It is magical, miraculous, amazing, and it should be greatly, greatly appreciated by adults as well as by children. And the importance is so incredibly vast. Okay, I have gathered the children's books that mean the world to me and that have influenced my entire life, and basically are the books that are everything that I just spoke about, the ones that I always return to, the ones that mean the most to me, the ones that have influenced me as a person, me as a writer, me as a reader, me as an illustrator, and they have just made me who I am right now. So I thought I would go through them and tell you guys about these books and why I think you should read them as adults, because they aren't just meant for children. Now, the first place that I have to start is, of course, the first book I've ever been read, in my memory at least. See, that would be a wonderful thing if my parents remembered. What was the first book they ever read to me? I would love to know that. I doubt they would remember that. But in my mind, this is the first book that was ever read to me. Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne, illustrated by E.H. Shepard. This is not actually illustrated by E.H. Shepard. This is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, a classic Disney treasury. So this is the book that my parents always read to my sister and I from. So these aren't the original illustrations. They are the Disney illustrations. So growing up, I had this book. This is how I read it, or my dad and my mom read it to us. My dad mainly read this book to us because he always loved it, so that was like my dad's job. My dad's book was Winnie the Pooh, and he had the best Tigger voice. There is the song that Tigger sings. I'm sure you know it if you love Winnie the Pooh. If not, it begins with saying, "The wonderful thing about Tigger is Tigger's the wonderful thing. The tops are made out of rubber, the bottoms are made out of springs." And it goes on and on. It's just one of my favorite songs. To this day, I make my dad sing it because he does a great job, and he does a Tigger voice, and it's amazing. See, I feel so silly talking about this, but don't feel silly. It's amazing. Winnie the Pooh was the book that introduced me to the world as a whole, introduced me to the 100-acre wood, introduced me to animals as humanized anthropomorphic characters. It introduced me to the world of honey and friendship and found family and love and care and sadness and hunger and anxiety. I could make a whole video on Winnie the Pooh. I don't know if you guys would even care to watch it, but I could talk about this book forever. How every single one of the characters is a type of person. They have very prominent and particular personality traits, and so I always find that really interesting. I do have many other editions of Winnie the Pooh. These are them. So I just bought this one recently, which is Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne. This one is illustrated by E.H. Shepard, and it is absolutely stunning. Are you kidding me? Oh my god, if I could have a conversation with E.H. Shepard, I would just ask him so many questions. And if I could watch anybody draw in real time, I would love to watch him just draw anything. But yes, this book means the absolute world to me. So I have this edition of it, which is the first book. So if you have never read Winnie the Pooh before, start with Winnie the Pooh. And then the second book is The House at Pooh Corner. This is an older edition that I found secondhand. It is so incredibly beautiful. This one's also fully illustrated by E.H. Shepard. Again, just absolutely stunning. My attachment to these stories is ridiculous. I think this is like one of the only books that when I start reading it, I get really happy to the point where I'm like slightly upset because I know it'll eventually end. And I remember as a kid, when my sister and I couldn't sleep, my parents would take us downstairs and put on the VHS of the Disney Winnie the Pooh. It has the voiceover of the narrator acting as A.A. Milne, telling us the story that is being written in the book. And when we got to the end, I was always devastated. It's just this very specific feeling that is dedicated and that just lives inside Winnie the Pooh. And it's this feeling of like dread for the book to end and complete and utter sorrow that I have to leave the 100-acre wood. And this sounds so silly, but it's true. The illustrations are one of the greatest influences for my own illustrations. My style is very similar to E.H. Shepard, as well as the next illustrator and writer that I want to talk about. I have them in paperback. So this is Winnie the Pooh, written by A.A. Milne with decorations by E.H. Shepard. If you guys watched that vlog where I introduced my own book, I talk about how I love that Winnie the Pooh doesn't say illustrated by E.H. Shepard, it says decorations by E.H. Shepard, and I just love that because it's so true. You're not only illustrating the book, but you're decorating it. It's like a room that you're filling with beautiful objects and beautiful humans and beautiful animals and beautiful characters. And then we have When We Were Very Young, which is the author of Winnie the Pooh, written by A.A. Milne, again with decorations by E.H. Shepard. This is a book of verse poems, and Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh are in this book, and then they are in a few more of them in Now We Are Six, which is again the same thing, written and illustrated by A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard. And then I also have a hardback version of When We Were Very Young. I want to live in his illustrations. They are just absolutely enchanting. The next writer and illustrator that I want to talk about also had the biggest influence on my life. I read them after I read Winnie the Pooh, so I wanted to talk about Winnie the Pooh first, but Winnie the Pooh and these books are tied for first place in my heart. The books are The Peter Rabbit Library. This is a whole box set by Beatrix Potter. We have The Tale of Peter Rabbit, The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin, The Tailor of Gloucester, The Tale of Benjamin Bunny, The Tale of Two Bad Mice, The Tale of Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, The Tale of Mr. Jeremy Fisher, The Tale of Tom Kitten, The Tale of Jemima Puddle Duck, The Tale of the Flopsy Bunnies, The Tale of Mrs. Tittlemouse, and The Tale of Johnny Town Mouse. This is just a selection of the stories. This isn't the full set, which I think I'm going to just purchase for myself, or maybe ask for it for Christmas or something. I will pull out The Tale of Peter Rabbit. This is obviously written and illustrated by Beatrix Potter. Again, if I could have a conversation with one person from history. So many come to mind, but one of them would definitely be Beatrix Potter. I would, again, like I said with E.H. Shepard, would love to just sit and ask her a million questions and talk to her about her life. She led such an incredible life. This is going to sound so silly, but I just feel like a kindred spirit with Beatrix Potter. I just see so much of myself in her. I feel so silly talking about this, but it is true. So many aspects of her life reflect a modern version or an older version of my more modern experience and life experience and personality. My dad had Winnie the Pooh. My mom had Beatrix Potter's The Tales of Peter Rabbit and her whole cast of characters. My mom always loved reading me Beatrix Potter. My dad always loved reading me A.A. Milne. That's just how it was in my childhood. These are absolutely stunning, and the stories that are written in here are beautifully illustrated. Are you kidding me? Like, these are also, again, very similar to my style. If I could describe my style in two illustrators, it would be E.H. Shepard and Beatrix Potter. You guys will see more of that in the near future with my process of writing and illustrating my own book. But yes, these books, if you have never read Beatrix Potter before, stop the video right now. I don't care if you stop watching this video. Please stop the video and read Beatrix Potter. That's all you have to do. It is amazing. It will bring you so much joy and so much light and so much life. I will link down below amazing videos about E.H. Shepard, A.A. Milne, Beatrix Potter, so many amazing writers and illustrators that I have loved. I just rewatched one of my favorite documentaries about Beatrix Potter. I love her. Please love her too. That is me asking you to read her books, please. Then the next books I did mention before is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. This is another one of the very first books that I read as a child. I remember reading this book because I had a hard time reading as a child. I would always get stuck on one word in this book, and it was busy. I never knew how to say busy. I remember looking at the word, seeing B-U-S-Y, and always saying, I think bussy, or I never knew how to say the word busy. And that word is in this book. Again, random side note or tangent, not that you care if I can pronounce the word busy when I was a kid, but this is also just gorgeously illustrated with beautiful line art and very minimalistic writing, and the story as a whole is not very long, but it holds so much in its pages, and it has so much to say in a very short amount of words, in a very small amount of words, and it's definitely worth the read if you've never read this book, especially as an adult, to read it. It is amazing. And then we have another one of my very favorite books. Please, if you have never read this book, stop the video and read it. That is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He is also the illustrator of the book. Shel Silverstein also illustrated The Giving Tree. And The Little Prince is what inspired my one and only tattoo, which is of 3 stars on my wrist, because this book is full of beautiful stars. And this one, as well as all these other books, had a huge influence in my life. I always wanted his stars on my wrist to see every day and remember why I am an illustrator and why I love storytelling and just everything that is captured in this book. I always want to remember, and so that's why I got the tattoo on my wrist. So if you look, yeah, this is like a perfect example. You can see all the beautiful stars. This book, like The Giving Tree, like all of these books, it has so much to say about everything in terms of life. So just please read it if you haven't read it. You will not be disappointed. And then the next book I have is, again, mentioned in my last vlog where I introduced my book. It had one of the biggest effects on my life, and that is Caps for Sale. This is told and illustrated by, I never know how to pronounce this name. I should have googled it before. Esfer Slobokina. I think I'm mispronouncing that. This is A Tale of a Peddler, Some Monkeys, and Their Monkey Business. Why is this book so special to me? Well, because I told this story in the vlog that I just mentioned, but I will retell it very briefly. When I was about 7 years old, my parents went to meet the teacher night at my school, and my grandparents came over to babysit my sister and I. One of the things that I wanted to do just to entertain myself was draw from Caps for Sale. I had an orange piece of construction paper out in front of me, and I had the book to the side, and I was copying one of the illustrations from Caps for Sale. First of all, when I was doing the drawing, I remember just having so much fun and loving illustrating the picture from the book. It was a decent drawing. That is the moral of the story. It was a good drawing for a 7-year-old, and I showed it to them, and I was so proud of it. And then my parents came home, and I showed them, and they were like blown away, as my parents would say. I don't know if they were actually blown away. I think just by the fact that I was so young and I was able to illustrate a page from a book impressed them. Anyway, that sounds so silly, but so yes, that was the moment that I realized I wanted to be a book illustrator, and I wanted to make pictures for a living. And I wanted to basically be the person that I can't say their name. I want to be like the authors and illustrators that have greatly influenced my life. So this is just a really, really funny book about this peddler who is selling caps, and these monkeys keep stealing the caps. I highly recommend it if you have a child in your life. If you want to read it as just by yourself as an adult, then more power to you. I highly recommend. But it's definitely a great book for children. It is quite funny, and it just has beautiful illustrations throughout it. And so yes, this is the book that made me really realize that I could be an illustrator. Not only that I wanted to be one, but that I could be one, because that's the moment when I realized that I was an artist, and that I loved being an artist, and that I loved illustrating books and stories. So yes, these are all of the books that I think you should read as adults, even though they're meant for children. Here they are in all their beautiful glory. There are so many more that have great influences on my life that I do think like all children's literature should be read by adults, but these are the ones that I like just highly recommend above all else. And yes, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It's kind of random, and I sort of feel like I don't even know what it is. I guess it's a recommendations video. I guess it's a video telling you why I think children's literature is so important to read. That is pretty much what it is, but yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed and have been inspired to read more children's literature and to go back to the books that you read as a kid and appreciate the books that we were given, the first stories that we ever read. I mean, how special is that? Thinking about the first stories that we ever read, being such huge readers, thinking back to the books that were the first ones ever. I just find that so amazing. So yes, anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and also thank you for the amazing feedback that you guys gave me on the video, the vlog that I keep mentioning, where I introduced my book to you guys. I got really personal and vulnerable in that video, which is something that I don't do very often just because it is very personal. And it was such a big choice in my life, deciding that I wanted to be a freelance illustrator and that I'm working on my own story. It's one thing to do it on your own, but it's another thing to tell the internet, and it gives a bit more pressure, but I think pressure that is good, that works and pushes me further. And your support and all of you guys saying that you can't wait to read the book and that you would buy it. Are you kidding me? You guys don't even know what it's about. You don't even know what the illustrations look like, and you already want to read it. So that means more than I can even put into words. So just, this is a really big thank you for being the greatest. And you guys are the reason why I can do what I do and why I can follow my heart and follow my dreams, because you are supporting me throughout it, and that just is something that I don't think I will ever be able to express in words, how that makes me feel. So I love you all very, very much. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Enjoyed this video. Let me know what children's books influenced you as a kid, and do you return to them often? If you want to read any of these books, if you read any of these books, if you love any of these books, please talk to me about them, because I've been consuming so much children's literature recently for my own book that all I want to do is talk about more children's literature. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you soon in another video. Happy reading.